everyone! Welcome to my channel Creepy Narratives. Today, I'm thrilled to share more spine-chilling stories that have actually happened to me and others who have experienced these so-called creepy scenarios. These incidents were so eerie, creepy and strange that they had us questioning the very reality that we knew. So, sit back, relax and prepare to be captivated by the enigma of these creepy narratives. Welcome to my nightmare. I think that you're going to like it. Enjoy. Let's start with story number 1. Story 1. The humbling experience. I've always been cautious about making new friends online, but one day, I decided to join a Discord group that seemed friendly and welcoming. Little did I know that this decision would lead to an ordeal that left me deeply traumatized. In this group, there was a member who stood out from the rest. He often shared stories of his involvement in major gang fights and dangerous situations. His tales were chilling, and they piqued my curiosity. I had never faced serious threats in my life, as safety had always been a constant for me. Then, one day, everything changed. Out of nowhere, this individual began sending me threats, making me fear for my life. It was a terrifying experience, one that I had never encountered before. The constant feeling of dread weighed heavily on me. A few days later, I mustered the courage to confront him, to beg him to stop terrorizing me. It was then that he finally revealed his motives. He claimed that he wanted to humble me, to make me less moody in the group. He insisted that he wasn't dictating me anymore, but made a request instead. Though the situation technically ended there, its effects lingered. I confided in others in the group about what had transpired, and they assured me that his threats seemed empty. However, none of them approved of his actions. Still, I was afraid to confront him further, fearing for my safety. The entire ordeal left me shocked and haunted. Even though he claimed not to dictate me anymore, the trauma persisted. It had been a month and a half, but the memory of that incident continued to cast a shadow over me. The group, once a source of camaraderie, now filled me with dread whenever I saw his presence. I contemplated leaving the group but felt trapped. Cutting ties with him would mean cutting ties with everyone else. My mind played tricks on me, making it difficult to sever that connection. Though I could block him on my private social media accounts, I still feared his threats. My emotional turmoil led me to seek help from a psychiatrist, who diagnosed me with PTSD. I found myself yearning for the peaceful life I had before joining that Discord server. This experience had revealed to me the darker side of human nature, a side I desperately wanted to avoid. I knew leaving the group was the right choice for my mental health, but I needed help to achieve that goal, a cry for help in a seemingly inescapable situation. Let's go to story number 2. Story 2. Bongo Man Encounter. It was an early June afternoon, and I found myself walking down the street after leaving my friend's jewelry studio. The sun was shining, and the day had a pleasant vibe. However, I would soon encounter something that would send shivers down my spine. As I strolled along, I began to hear faint, rhythmic sounds echoing through the neighborhood. Bongos, to be precise, were creating a strange, hypnotic melody. Initially, I assumed it was music from a nearby bar or perhaps a car's sound system. But as I drew closer, I realized the eerie truth: the source of the music was stationary. Before me stood a man, an imposing figure, towering at 6 feet 8 inches. He resembled a homeless version of Danny DeVito, complete with a potbelly and a grizzled appearance. To my surprise, he held a boombox, which blared out the haunting bongo rhythm. As I continued to approach, this towering figure turned towards me and growled, beckoning me to come closer. Fear gripped me, and I instinctively declined his invitation, uttering a polite, "No, thank you, sir." In a hurry, I quickened my pace towards my parked car, which was a good distance away. My heart raced as I reached my car, fumbling for my key fob. Panic set in as I realized that the side door lock didn't work. The imposing figure was now closing in, reaching for my passenger door. In a frantic scramble, I leaped into the driver's seat, hastily inserting the key into the ignition. With trembling hands, I turned the key, and the engine roared to life. As I sped away, the bizarre bongo man stumbled off the curb, his futile attempt to open my door thwarted. The unnerving encounter left me rattled, the haunting bongo music still echoing in my ears, a reminder of the surreal encounter with the towering, homeless Danny DeVito impersonator. Are you ready for story number 3? Story 3. Dumped in the Woods. This chilling tale dates back to 1971 or 1972, in the heavily wooded area near Montevallo, Alabama. My mother was a teenager of about 14 or 15 at the time, and her family, including her parents, 3 sisters, and her baby brother, embarked on a weekend trip into the woods. The family outing had an unusual purpose: to engage in target practice with a rifle. Living in modest circumstances in less than ideal neighborhoods, my grandfather wanted to ensure his children knew how to defend themselves with a firearm if the need ever arose. As they ventured deeper into the woods on this cool fall day, the trees were bare, and leaves blanketed the forest floor. The wooded area was remote, accessible only via a dirt road, and was a fairly rural region. My grandfather set up a target for the children to practice their shooting. However, their peaceful day took a terrifying turn when they heard the roar of a car engine deep within the woods. The car, a blue Ford Galaxy, seemed out of place in such a remote location. My grandfather, armed with a rifle, was unnerved by the unexpected presence and instructed my grandmother and the children to hide under a pile of leaves in the woods. As they huddled together, the car's engine noise grew closer. Suddenly, the car came to a halt, and the man driving it got out. He dragged a woman's lifeless body from the vehicle and carelessly dumped her in the woods, just a short distance from where the family was hiding. Once the man departed, my grandfather cautiously emerged from their hiding spot, and the children followed suit. To their astonishment, the woman, despite her ordeal, was alive and conscious. My grandfather approached her, asking if she needed help, but she declined. She appeared uninjured and showed no signs of resisting the man who had dragged her from the car. Resolving to end the target practice early, my grandfather hurried the family back to their vehicle, determined to ensure their safety. As they retraced their steps along the trail, they encountered the man in the blue Ford Galaxy driving out of the woods. The man struck up a conversation, asking about their day and their presence in the woods. My grandfather, carrying a rifle, tried to appear nonchalant, but everyone remained careful not to reveal the traumatic scene they had just witnessed. As the man continued driving away, my mother noticed a large machete on the car's front seat beside him. The encounter had shaken them all, but they managed to reach their vehicle safely. That night, my grandfather returned to the spot in the woods, but there was no trace of the woman's body. Only her purse, a few tissues, and a pair of eyeglasses remained, serving as eerie reminders of the inexplicable event. The woods, they discovered, had a sinister reputation for shallow graves and as a dumping ground for bodies. Though my mother's family reported the incident to the police, they never heard any further developments. The memory of that day haunted them, and my grandmother even made a disturbing phone call the next morning, warning the children not to take the bus to school because the car was waiting for them at the bus stop. Let's continue with story number 4. Story 4. Highway Pursuit. My daily routine was well established. I'd kickstart my mornings with a workout, then make my way to my job. My usual departure time hovered around 5:30 a.m., allowing for a 25 to 30-minute drive before my workday began. The early hours meant most commuters were in a hurry, zipping along the freeway at speeds comfortably exceeding the legal limit. My route primarily consisted of cruising down a major interstate. However, a few minutes into my drive, I'd merge onto a smaller highway that served as my final approach. This highway boasted 3 lanes on each side, and while people generally kept a brisk pace, it rarely turned into a chaotic race. On a seemingly routine morning, a peculiar incident unfolded. As I entered from the eastbound side, I noticed 3 cars simultaneously joining from the westbound side. One of them was a vibrant orange vehicle with a sporty vibe, while the other two were dark gray sedans. Those sedans weren't your run-of-the-mill commuter cars, they were models you wouldn't encounter every day. The three vehicles quickly caught my attention because they weren't following typical commuter etiquette. They were all going at least 80 miles per hour, and their movements on the road were anything but ordinary. The orange car would dart between lanes, and the sedan in front of it would aggressively cut it off. The other gray sedan trailed closely behind, mirroring the moves of its lead vehicle. This bizarre dance continued relentlessly, with the cars weaving dangerously through the traffic. They showed no signs of slowing down or calming their erratic behavior. I watched this strange spectacle unfold in front of me until it was time for me to exit the highway. While it might have been a case of road rage or a feud among these drivers, I couldn't help but sense that the driver of the orange car was desperately trying to escape the relentless pursuit by the two gray sedans. Are you ready for story number 5? Story 5. The Alley Confrontation. I was a 19-year-old navigating the complexities of homelessness in a bustling city. On a typical day, I'd head back to the shelter from a public library, but one particular afternoon would haunt me for years to come. As I attempted to cut through a narrow city alley on my way home, I had no idea how drastically my life was about to change. The alley was just wide enough for a car to pass through, which, on most days, didn't pose any issues. However, as I strolled along that fateful day, I couldn't help but notice an old, battered car slowly trailing behind me. At first, I thought nothing of it, attributing its cautious pace to a desire to avoid accidents on the tight alleyway. As I continued down the alley, the car kept its distance but persisted in following me. Inside, a man who appeared to be in his mid-20s, his Hispanic features accentuated by an unsettling grin, rolled down the window. He asked, "Hey, are you okay? How old are you?" Given my short stature and youthful appearance, his question seemed reasonable, yet my instincts detected an underlying threat. Attempting to quell my growing unease, I replied, "I'm fine, and I'm not a minor, if that's what you're concerned about." However, the man remained undeterred. He continued to offer me a ride, insisting he only wanted to talk, his unsettling smile never wavering. As the minutes ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I asked him why we couldn't have our conversation right there on the street, but he dodged the question, persistently urging me to accept a ride. It became increasingly clear that this encounter harbored sinister intentions, and I needed to tread carefully. My senses on high alert, I glanced around to ensure I wasn't walking into an ambush. With deliberate caution, I approached the passenger window, my voice taking on a menacing tone. "I know you don't really want to talk. I'm sure you have worse things in mind," I warned, taking another quick scan of my surroundings. "I've memorized your license plate, and I'll go straight to the police if I see you again." Remarkably, I never crossed paths with him again after that spine-chilling encounter. However, in my rush to escape, I had forgotten to jot down his license plate number, leaving me unable to file a report or seek further action. It's time for story number 6. Story 6. Mountain Mystery. The mountains of North Carolina had always beckoned to me, their serene beauty a sanctuary for hiking and camping. On this particular trip, my family and I were in Maggie Valley, staying in an RV. However, my yearning for adventure led me to venture out alone, embarking on a journey to Cold Mountain. My plan was to hike up, spend the night, and descend the following morning. While I wasn't an experienced hiker or camper, the mountains had always held a special place in my heart. Yet, as I would soon discover, this trip would be unlike any other. The hike began relatively uneventful, with ups and downs that gradually wore me down. Evening descended upon me sooner than I expected, prompting the need to set up camp while there was still daylight. I made the decision to stop half a mile short of the summit, intending to continue my ascent the following day. That night, as I lay in my tent, sleep remained elusive. An eerie sense of foreboding settled over me. At one point, I thought I heard faint footsteps nearby, their rhythm consistent enough to suggest they weren't products of my imagination. An unsettling realization gripped me, and I retrieved a large knife from my bag, placing it within reach inside my sleeping bag. The morning sun eventually broke through, and I prepared a quick meal. As I gazed at my tent, I noticed something peculiar. There, propped against the side of my tent, was a bizarre bundle of dried twigs and berries, secured with green cord. Alarm bells rang in my mind, and without hesitation, I packed up my belongings and departed within minutes, abandoning my plans to reach the summit. During my descent, I encountered heavy fog and briefly lost my way on a side trail. Relying on my compass, I managed to find my way back to the main trail and eventually emerged from the wilderness unscathed. It wasn't until later that I learned of a 27-year-old man who had perished on the same section of the trail I had traversed. The circumstances surrounding his death remained shrouded in mystery, and the information about his demise had been curiously erased from the internet. The thought of someone watching me, unbeknownst to me, sent shivers down my spine and left me haunted by the enigma of that mountain adventure. Let's go on to story number 7. Story 7. Haunted Haven. This place was an eerie haven of discomfort. Even during the day, I never escaped the oppressive feeling of being watched. The source of my unease was somewhat understandable, given the grim history that hung heavy in the air. It was where my wife's uncle, Jay, had met his untimely demise. But it wasn't just the nights that were unsettling, the days too carried an inexplicable sense of foreboding. My wife and I shared this dread, especially when the sun dipped below the horizon. Things seemed to normalize for a while until strange events began to unfold. Kay, my friend and partner in this unsettling journey, started to suffer from unexplained bouts of nausea and dizziness. A trip to the hospital resulted in a diagnosis of the flu, but deep down, I sensed something far more sinister at play. Then, on an eerie anniversary of Jay's death, precisely 3 days after the fatal date, a chilling incident struck. Kay burst out of his camper, panic etched across his face, and screamed for help. The sound of his distress instantly roused my wife and me from our sleep. Rushing outside, we found Kay had climbed into his car and accelerated, crashing it into a nearby tree. Frantically, I peered through the car window, and what I saw haunted me to my core. The fear in Kay's eyes was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. He clutched his chest, gasping for air, and in a matter of moments, he breathed his last breath. We attempted CPR for half an hour until the emergency services arrived, but it was futile. On July 10th, 1 year and 3 days after we had moved here with Jay, both Jay and Kay were gone. Now, it was only my wife and me left, alone on this cursed property, living in perpetual fear and grappling with the inexplicable horrors that had unfolded. We couldn't fathom why we hadn't left immediately. One day, I ventured out to retrieve fresh water from a drum we kept. As I approached it, a putrid stench overwhelmed my senses. I opened the container with a 1-inch opening, and inside, I discovered bits and pieces of the chipmunk's spines and heads. They hadn't simply fallen, and something had torn them apart and left them there. The nights grew increasingly unbearable. Shadows played tricks on my eyes, and a constant feeling of dread gnawed at me. Fear in the woods, even in the darkest hours, was an entirely new experience for me. Every snap of a branch or rustling of pine needles sent shivers down my spine. I knew something lurked out there, something malevolent, and it wanted me to know it was watching. One night, as my wife and I returned home, an overwhelming sense of dread enveloped us. Each second spent driving up that long, dirt road intensified my anxiety. The thick fog obscured our surroundings, and without the faint glimmer of a full moon, it would have been impenetrable darkness. Everything appeared normal, yet different. It was as though reality had shifted slightly. As I gazed around, a mangy, orange, long-haired cat perched on a stump captured my attention. Its eyes burned with an intense, sinister fire. That cat, in my mind, was the embodiment of pure evil, darkness personified. It sat there, staring at me, and I was almost paralyzed by fear. Abruptly, the forest came to life with the sounds of branches breaking and pine needles crunching, seemingly coming from every direction. The underbrush swayed ominously. I couldn't tear my gaze from the cat, but the shrieking voice of a woman sliced through the air. "Help me! Somebody expletive help me!" The voice was so jarring, so filled with malevolence that it felt like it pierced my very being. The terror was beyond description. I knew it was out there, watching me, and it wanted me to know. My wife, too, was overcome with fear, and we left that accursed place, never to return again.